Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today's guest is Jim Brault. Jim is the Chief HR Officer at Xaar. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us, Jim. Filling the gaps, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your journey to becoming the CHRO within your organization.
Sure. So I started out in studying in undergrad psychology, which I just was fascinated by. I guess, Edison said if we all did the things we were capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. And that sentiment probably driven me for the last 40 years. So I was just so intrigued and curious about performance and human potential. So, I went for psychology and I thought, well, how can I actually apply this? I didn't really want to go into the therapeutic realm. And so I decided to go into human resources. So I went to Cornell and got my first job and was in recruitment and employee relations. And after about a year and a half, I hated it. I didn't like HR. I thought it was very reactive. It was very administrative at the time and really different than what I had learned from the ILR school. So I decided I wanted to be in my own businesses. So I did a few things. I bought a fish market and seafood restaurant, which I knew absolutely nothing about, but learned very quickly. And then I started a franchise of Tony Robbins in Rochester, New York. And, that was great. We did that for about 4 years and actually became one of the top revenue franchises, even though we had a really small market, and just learned a lot from him. Tremendous guy. And then I started a sales and marketing consulting company and eventually got Kodak as a client. And so I was designing sales training for them. After a while, they offered me a job and this was kind of 96, and I spent a few years in the training realm. And then around 2000, got back into HR. And I guess because of Kodak was a very progressive company in terms of HR, and I had business experience, I brought something a little bit different than probably the average person, even though I had the academic background. So I was pretty quickly got up to head of HR director for various businesses, and after a bit, they were kind of in the 700, 750 million range, so pretty big, sizable, employees in 30 plus countries. Then I was asked to go join and head up for HR a joint venture between Kodak and Heidelberg. So a lot of travel and detailed work in Germany and the UK, and of course in the US. Then Kodak bought 5 companies in the graphics industry and brought them together. So over 12,000 employees in 36 countries from 5 companies.
Wow.
We brought in on one day.
Oh my God.
I mean, just imagine just like getting people paid and, all
everything.
Nuts and bolts.
Let alone the cultural impact.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we can talk about that later. Then actually as part of that, so I came back to Kodak. Then I was asked to go up to Vancouver, Canada, beautiful part of the world, to integrate a company called CHRO, who had been headquartered in Vancouver, but also had bought part of Cytex in Tel Aviv, Israel, a few years earlier. So they had a really different culture and very software based, and that was very different than kind of Kodak. So fast forward, I was kind of the number 2 guy at Kodak, had everything reporting me with the exception of comp and benefits. Kodak unfortunately went through a bankruptcy process called Chapter 11, very, very complex and really, really tough on the workforce, as you can imagine. So I kind of helped out there, and then when Kodak emerged from bankruptcy, became the chief human resources officer and stayed there for a bit, and then a guy I'd worked with at Kodak became the CEO of Xaar back in 2015, and he was there for about 3 days. and called me up and said, "Hey, I need you here." And I said, "Wow, it's a little further than I like to commute. It's in Cambridge in the UK, and my wife and family still live in Rochester, New York." So I said, "But I thought it was a tremendous challenge." So yeah, I've been here almost 3 years.
Amazing. Very, very interesting journey, by the way. I wasn't expecting the beginning part as well. So, but I suppose that's what makes you who you are and what made you unique. You said earlier how you brought a unique perspective to HR.
Yeah.
If you didn't
Yeah.
have that experience and you came straight out of education into HR without that real life experience of running those organizations, working with people like Tony, different things, that, I suppose that was what really gave you that edge to succeed.
Yeah.
So.
And, I think there are people that do tremendous things in HR. I mean, really, really innovative, great thinking. And if I look at my niche, we were talking before about your niche in terms of, your company. Dave Ulrich, who you had on your program, had some research that I've adopted I really like, and it looked at organizational capability. So you kind of start out with a strategy and your goals, and then you look at, well, what's the culture to get the results you need. And he looks at and defines that culture as having 4 elements. One is the mindset. What's the mindset you need? Second is the leadership. What do you want leaders to do, to be good at? How do you assess them and develop them and reward them? And then you look at your talent, which could be internal or external. And then you look at the infrastructure and processes. I think where I focus and probably have maybe a better appreciation than most is around the mindset. Partially because of that's always been my interest, but my time with Tony Robbins, and then actually a lot of focus with a guy named Mark Divine, who I started working with and learning from back in kind of 2012 and 2013. He's a New York Times bestseller of a few different books and a former 20-year Navy SEAL commander. And when I was at Kodak and we were going through chapter 11, that was just incredibly challenging and stressful. And I was looking for, and just to give you some context, back in the mid 80s in the city I grew up in, Rochester, New York, which was about 700,000 people, 85,000 people worked for Kodak.
Wow.
So, I mean, that, pretty much they either worked for Kodak or Xerox, and people had worked there for generations. If you said anything bad about Kodak, they would literally, you might have a fight on your hands. That's how loyal people were. And then we went from 36,000 employees to about 8,000 in 4 years. We had massive, massive reductions. And so, as you can imagine, people were sad, angry, scared. And, I was heading up most of HR. And so I was like, wow, how can we help these people? And I thought, how can we engender resilience? How can we have mental toughness to get through this really difficult thing? And so I looked at Mark's work in something called Unbeatable Mind. And I thought, this is fantastic. This is, who better than Navy SEALs or Special Forces anywhere, I guess, to have that resilience, how to get the job done no matter what, so that's kind of what I was thinking. What I found out was these guys are incredibly smart, phenomenal at communications, very, very direct, make sure they understand, great at teamwork, great at leadership. So I got so much more than I thought. And so, whether it's Tony Robbins or Mark Divine or Milton Erickson, all these people have helped kind of influence me and shape the mindset piece. Because if you get that right, then I think, you get the right leaders and you get the right talent, and the infrastructure and process is probably the easiest part. But if you don't have the mindset, I wouldn't give you a whole lot for the rest of it. And I think that's where is a huge opportunity for people, and probably in the HR community, probably something that's the least talked about and developed of those 4.
Very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing that as well. I was in my brain, I was trying to take that all in at the same time. No, I think, as you said, you are completely right. I think the focus is way too much on the processes and the strategies and not so much on getting the mindset right. Because when it comes to actually executing those strategies and actually making it happen, unless
Yeah.
that mindset is in the right place, as you said, then it will very, very quickly fall flat in the face of any sort of challenge. If they don't have that correct mindset, then you're not gonna achieve the results as well. So really appreciate you sharing that insight with us. Could you share perhaps a project or a transformation that you've been through that you're most proud of?
Yeah, so there are probably two. The one I mentioned before, just
Sure.
the sheer magnitude of bringing 12,000 employees into a company on one day in 36 countries. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, the people even got paid and all that stuff. We did I thought that was a great project to just be part of, and understanding the cultures and just everyone working together as a team. That was great. I think the current project, and it's certainly not done, but that I'm involved with now at Xaar, is transforming the company. Our CEO has been very vocal externally about the vision with the company, and it's really driving the revenue increase by 125%, really over a few years, which is amazing. And so, thinking about transformation and why I was even interested in the job to begin with was I saw the potential. What the company is really, really good at is building technology, building, in our case, industrial inkjet print heads. So they're really good at that. But then how do you grow, become much more customer focused, really shift the mindset from being very UK, Cambridge, Science Park based with brilliant, I mean, Cambridge University is just a couple miles away. I mean, we have access to world-class brains and talent. I mean, that's amazing. The kind of flip side of that is it can get very internally focused and technology focused versus what do the customers want, what do the market want. And so how do we transform and build upon a company that's grown up from really nothing to a very substantial company over time, and then how do you more than double that in the space of a few years? So, we have, so that's a significant challenge.
Sure.
And if you think just about, well, all right, you kind of built the first floor of this building in pieces. You started with one room and you made some additions. Okay, now you've got to put a second floor on, and you can't do it one at a time. You've got to really look at what you need to finish that second floor. And we spent a lot of time talking about the mindset and getting that ready. So when I came on board, we did an employee survey, as you can imagine, and about less than half the employees understood the vision. You ask them, where's the company headed? They didn't know. Of those who knew, the majority didn't believe it. So, okay, so you don't know where you're going, and even if you do, you don't believe it. Well, we might have some work to do there.
Yes.
Now we have, last survey we did, 97% of the people understood the vision. I'm still looking for that 3%. Who doesn't know? But you ask people, they absolutely know. Part of the mindset is the values. When we came, the CEO and I came, there were 5 values that the company espoused. Even the HR team, if you asked them, you could see they looked up and they were trying to remember the acronym for the 5, and they'd get maybe 2 or 3 right. Okay, this was HR, so the average employee is like, I don't know. Now every employee knows what we have 3, made it easier.
Yeah.
Everyone knows, but more importantly, they live it. We put in processes to embed those and reward people and assess people on those. But that was the thing. Now, we even are bringing everyone through a program called Inspired Leaders, which really helps them think about the mindset in the following ways. One is we get every person rather, what's your why? What drives you? Because if you understand that, you can tap into it and not have someone else motivate you. And then you can work on your strengths and, all the Marcus Buckingham work. So that's number one. Two is, what's your vision? We have a company vision, but how does that reflect in your life? Does it make sense? I mean, do you have a vision? Does that excite you? Because if our vision doesn't excite you, or you don't understand your role in that, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of value in having a company vision. So helping people understand that. Third is your beliefs. If you don't believe it's possible, then you're not going to see opportunities. You're going to ask different questions. If you do, you could say, hey, who do we know that has done that? How could we do that? You're going to ask more empowering questions than, limiting. We look at focus. How do you focus and have that front sight focus, that, the ability to just be present? We look at resilience, which is huge for us. We look at how to get better outcomes. We look at ethos and kind of aligned to values, but how do we hold ourselves accountable? And not from HR and not some mandate, but we as a team, what do we want to do? What do we want to never do? And how do we want to hold ourselves accountable for that? So those are the areas that probably aren't typical to have, but we're doing this across the company. So it's a phenomenal HR exercise, and really exciting, because the biggest part of making the transformation is the organizational capability to pull that off. So exactly. We're in the midst of it. We cannot declare victory yet, but we're certainly on our way.
It's always going to be an ongoing process, right? It's not going to be something that's going to be solved overnight. And even then, when you get to the peak where you are for seeing results, you're going to just keep pushing, right? So I think everyone always looks at this end goal. It doesn't exist, unfortunately. What are some of the practical things that you're doing to deliver this message across the organization? For our listeners, what are some practical steps that they can take, say tomorrow, not tomorrow because that's the weekend where we are, but on Monday, so they can actually get this message out to the organization and start seeing this engagement?
Yeah. So two things are important. One, we created in the training, we created two elements that I've actually never done before, but I got from Commander Divine, to have in buds and in the SEALs, they have swim buddies. We call them dive buddies, but someone that is there you can have as a accountability partner, or to help you and support you, and also call you out going, hey, you're dragging, kick it, let's go. And so everybody gets a dive buddy to help them. We also have boat crews, so it's 7 or 8 people, and we had boat crews for each of those 8 topics. So their job and their remit, if you will, was to go out and say, how do you embed resilience within the company? Or how do you embed your why? Because that resilience probably is pretty easier for people to wrap their heads around. Your why is like, what do we do?
It's funny when you ask people that as well, because we had Simon Sinek led one of the sessions I worked in the past. And it was funny, after I read some of his work, even I went home the same evening and was like, what is my why? Yeah. And then my mind just went off on a whole tangent. So when I've asked my team members that question on multiple occasions, they're like, oh my God, I have no idea.
Yeah. And it's not something you get and you figure out in 5 minutes.
No.
And it's not, part of it's not even your kind of rational, logical thinking mind. You've got to look at your memories, your instincts, your gut, your feelings. So you have to actually quiet your mind to figure this out. And so those are two important things, to have the boat crews that you can also say, all right, hey team, what do we want to do? How do we want to challenge ourselves this month? It could be hey, we're going to go, might be a physical challenge to help their resilience, or it could be, we're going to do management by walking around, or do active listening. So those are really important, I think, because that embeds it kind of in the fabric of the company versus being this training that was, yeah, it was great, we got excited, and then a week later, you know, you sort of forgot about it. But to answer your question more directly then, so for the why and the vision, we gave leaders kind of different questions to ask in normal one-on-ones. We have development plans. We call them individual development plans here. And all the managers will sit down with their people at least twice a year to go through that. But part of it is, you know, in terms of your why, what's your passion, what's your purpose, and what's your principles? So first, your passion is what excites you. When you had a great day at work, what made it a great day? It's an easy question to ask, but or you say, who are people you admire? And what do you admire about them? Or what's the best compliment someone could give you? These are all different ways to get at those things that, you know, that you really value. On the flip side, because I think that's also instructive, you could say, well, when you had a bad day at work, what made it bad? Or, you know, if you left a job, why did you leave your last job? These basic questions. But most managers would ask that in an interview and then never again.
Ask it again. Yeah.
Never ask again.
I never understood that.
Yeah.
They ask some of the most important questions in the interview process and never again after that.
Yeah. So and also, what's your vision? So you say, okay, here's a company vision, but where do you see yourself? I mean, what really inspires you? What would be worth that investment of time and energy? So those are specific things. There was a huge area around feedback. It's amazing because, you know, in this environment, which I think is not unlike other companies, they measure things to the micron level. I mean, and the feedback from a technical perspective is so direct, so blunt. I mean, like, you know, I wouldn't say rude, but I mean, super direct. Engineers to engineer, they're just like, no. But then when you get into giving feedback to people on, you know, performance, oh my gosh, it's like, you know, well, we can't do that, you know. And so so we use a couple things. We looked at Kim Scott Malone's Radical Candor, which I thought was really great. A simple tool. It's 4 quadrants, but getting people to say, you know, where have you given feedback or received feedback in the past, and how did that feel? Either giving or receiving, and was it valuable, and what did you do? We also use Marshall Goldsmith's feed forward exercise. But I guess the basic thing, these are kind of tools, but to get people to think about maybe in different environments how much you need and actually like feedback. I mean, football is a big thing here in the UK, and you know, everyone played it. So you say, hey, did you have a coach for football? Yeah. Did they give you feedback? Constantly. How'd you feel about it? Great. I needed it. Okay. Let's take that idea into the workplace.
Everyone's very I think, but now it's more and more, people are getting more and more sensitive as well. And then companies are starting to get more, like, if I look back at when I first started my career, when I was 17, it was just no holds bar in terms of feedback. like the most direct feedback you'd ever, I can't even say the feedback on the podcast of how direct it was. Very sales driven, as you can imagine. The boiler room environment, everyone standing there selling, you know, it was completely crazy. And then you look at the modern day workplace right now, and I look around at even my sales team, and it's just like night and day. And it's a culture shift as well of how that is. But I do think it does hinder in some sense, because, you know, a lot of having that feedback is what you need to move forward. And the longer you prolong that, then you're not going to get around the issue. So how have you approached that?
Yeah, first going back to changing the mindset. So we implemented a 9-box grid, which, you know, a lot of companies have, but then there's also the exact opposite, where some companies don't have performance appraisals at all. Yes. And they have more of an ongoing good dialogue, which you absolutely need. And, you know, you could debate which one's better. You know, one of the things that I picked up from the SEALs was they measure everything, and they give feedback all the time because their lives dependent on it. You know, our lives don't depend on it, but our livelihoods do. And so for them, and this was important, we had a boat crew for feedback, because I'm like, I can influence, and I can put a 9-box, you know, so you rate kind of your results versus your values, and people are put in different boxes, and they're told which box they're in, and then they get more or less bonus based on where they are. So it's really pretty apparent. And the problem was, we didn't have leaders who were having those discussions. Ideally, I'd love them to have the right discussions without having to put people in a box. But we're like, you know what? We're not getting there. People are just, you know, you've seen, I'm sure everyone on listening has heard this. You know, it's like the person's horrible. You look at their performance appraisal, they look like, you know, they walk on water, and then the next thing they want them out. Yeah, okay. So what conversations were not had, or were not had very well, to use the crucial conversations, you know, lexicon. So really we have implemented different processes, but Chris, really what we came back is working on the mindset, and they are the leaders for this. I mean, we got the leaders of the company. So the CEO, his whole staff were in the first sessions. So they're the ones that are championing this versus HR trying to push it, because I just haven't seen that be super effective. So helping people think about feedback and how important it is, and the ways that it's done effectively and received well versus not, shifting the mindset. The rest is actually easy.
Fantastic. And where we are now, I suppose, especially with an organization like your own, which is predominantly technology based, where do you see, what skills do you believe will be more important in the future? And how are you and the HR team preparing for that shift?
So the skills overall?
Yeah, both in HR and also externally, because I think it's both changing. Okay.
So the skills in HR are really to, again, use a Dave Ulrich kind of the 4-quadrant model. The one in the upper right around people and strategy is leading culture change. And so to do that, I think the HR team really needs to have a few different skill sets. One is ability to coach, which is interesting because I asked, you know, in various organizations that I've been a part of, how many people coach, and that's a key part of your role, and everyone raises their hand. I said, okay, great. How many people have had training on coaching? Nobody. How do you know you're doing it effectively? You don't, because all the coaching happens in a closed office. No one's watching you. No one's giving you feedback. How maybe you're doing a great job, maybe you're doing a good job, but not as good as you can do, or maybe you're doing a lousy job. You have no idea. So being able to coach effectively is key. I think to have a systems approach and systems mindset, to look back, you know, be able to step back and say, all right, we're in this situation, or we're seeing these behaviors or this dynamic. Why are we here? And what are the root causes of this? And what should we really be looking at to change versus just dealing with the reactive problem? I think that's a key area. And then I guess going back to kind of the mindset, but when I went to school and then in HR, we looked at team development and we looked at organization development, right? You know, we had classes in OD, and we had classes in, you know, teams and different assessments and how to work. We didn't talk about personal development at all. I mean, we had development plans and succession plans, but I don't think HR spent a whole lot of time on personal development. You know, they would farm that out to training and or L&D, but most HR people weren't that skilled in that. And then of course going to Tony Robbins, and he was all about personal development, not at all about really team or organization. That's not what he was trying to do. So I came in with a kind of different viewpoint of, I understand the organization, I understand the team, but I also really understand the individual. And so I think it would be good for HR teams to understand all those three. So you can constantly look at all those elements and see which levers you want to pull and which things you want to look at. Because if you're only looking at one, you look at the system or the organization and teams, well, yeah, someone's not doing well, let's bring in someone from OD to work on it, and they'll work on it and it'll go away. I haven't found that model to be super effective because, you do some work and then you leave it. So those are the areas that I think from an HR standpoint, from an overall company standpoint, we have some unique things. I think for us, getting closer to the customer, being able to predict disruptive technology and where the customer is going and make those shifts quickly enough. In the digital age, people, think about Kodak,
yeah.
A new film would come along maybe every 3 years, or 7. I think actually it was every 7 years. You had a long time to commercialize a product. Digital came out. Wow. The product launch cycle might be 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year. So how to get closer to the customer, really understand and be able to predict where those things are going and all the related pace. I think then what goes with that is, how do you keep people resilient to be able to deal with that pace, to be able to deal with that, 24/7. You look at back in the 1800s, the average person slept around 10 hours a night. Early 1900s, it was about 8 hours a night. Now it's around 6.5. And all the research says you need at least 7.5 hours of sleep. And if you look at all the implications of chronic sleep deprivation, it's scary. Hormonal issues, diabetes, overweight, heart, you name it. And so how do we help our workforce have that resilience? Because the pace of change is not going to slow. It's going to go faster. So how do we help people do that? And right now, a lot of people are wired but tired.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah, but they're tired. So,
yeah.
Something's got to give, whether it's their health or personal relationships or, just ability to engage and care. So that I think that's going to be on the forefront. I don't recall seeing much about resilience, 3 or 4 years ago, and now it's kind of a hot topic.
It is. You're certainly all right. To both things you said, resilience and also the personal development piece. It seems funny that that's the part that's been forgot about. I had a conversation a few weeks back with Chris Rainey, and he's talking about in some of the training that he had with sort of senior HR leaders that he said, put your hand up if you've ever had any training on delegation. And he said, I think 80% of the chief HR officers in the room had never had any training on delegation. Yet those are the guys that are delegating for the strategies that are supposed to change their entire business.
Wow.
So just something as simple as that question was pretty mind blowing. I was like, really? And no, 80% of those, and we were talking about huge organizations here with global transformations, and these guys have never had any training on how to even delegate these into their teams. So I do think that's something that's forgotten about, and we do promote leaders without giving them the necessary skills and training to achieve what we have. So it goes back to that point earlier of, creating an amazing strategy, but when it comes to the execution, if you haven't got the mental state right, and also you don't have the skill set, then it's going to fall apart very, very quickly as well. Look, that leads us quite nicely onto the quick fire round. Where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Amazing answers. Wow.
Amazing answer.
Okay.
No pressure. Uh,
I'll give you an answer, but okay.
no problem.
Yeah.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior HR leader?
So at the chief human resource officer level, it was exposure to the board and executive compensation. That was kind of secret, and so didn't have any sense of what the board dynamics were, what the role of the CHRO was, and executive comp for directors and most senior people. I just didn't have experience in that, so that was the biggest gap for me.
Great. What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Two things. That was actually from my fish market days. One from the Greek guy that I bought it from. He said, speak up, because no one else will. And another one was a guy had a very, very successful, multi-million-dollar business. And he was talking about he and his brother had this vision of where they wanted to grow their business. And what was really interesting for me was like, you know what? I don't have a vision for this. That's not really what I want to do. So for me, it was do something where you have a vision and you're passionate about. Otherwise, you won't. So yeah, those were
great,
simple but powerful lessons.
They're certainly powerful. What's one book you'd recommend to our audience, and why?
Yeah, so it's Unbeatable Mind by Mark Divine, and all around resilience, execution, how to use your mind effectively across different mountains. So physical, mental, emotional, kind of your intuition and awareness, and then your fighting, non-quitting spirit. It's a great book.
Perfect. Seems exactly in line with the needs of a HR leader.
Yeah.
What's one internet resource that you use to increase your own productivity or stay in tune with current events?
Yeah, great question. So this might sound bad, but I love YouTube.
Why is that bad? Not at all.
I think whether it's a TED Talk or like Simon Sinek or you just you get some really deep thinking, and you can watch someone for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. I mean, that's phenomenal, and you can you can learn what they're hearing about. So I just love it. I think it's the amount you can learn and we can learn is amazing.
Yeah, I certainly share. That's my number one tool. So
all right, okay.
That's how I learned how to set up a podcast.
Oh, good.
How to deliver a podcast. So it definitely works.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
I say that to everyone when they say, "How do I do it on YouTube?" Or Google and YouTube. You have no excuse.
Yeah,
to learn anything, I think, in this world now.
That's right.
What's one thing about your business that most excites you today?
The transformation. If it was growing by 3% or 5%, frankly, it'd be boring to me. And so to have this huge goal and understand, and for the CEO to say, the biggest thing is the organizational capability to pull it off. It's like, wow, that's great. Hoo-yah, let's go.
Something to get out of bed every day for, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, you've been a great guest and certainly provided a lot of very interesting resources and actionable advice. So I certainly know that our members would be a lot better off for it. So thank you very much for that. Give our listeners one parting piece of guidance and also the best way to get in contact with you if they wish to do so. Yeah.
So I would say keep challenging yourself, constantly grow, constantly push yourself. That's the way to grow. And then the other thing is focus on other people. Who can you help? I mean, we're in that business anyway, which is great. But ask yourself at the end of the day, who did I help today? I mean, what better question to ask? So yeah, if people want to get, you can reach me at email jim.bro@xaar.com, and there's a lot of spelling involved there.
I'll link it. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah. So you can link that. But yeah, I'd love to hear people, network, see if they have any questions or anything that I can learn from them. That'd be great. But Chris, thanks so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem. I appreciate you coming. Guys, make sure you head over to hrdleaders.com. There you'll find all of the show notes on the episode, everything we were talking about, all of the different links and resources that were mentioned and throughout the podcast, which there were many. So I'll make sure I link them all in there. So I really appreciate that. Jim, thank you again for sharing your journey with us. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Take care.